So good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this session, Tree, Woodland and Food Growing Projects with Schools in Urban Environments, which is part of the Cambridge Zero Climate Change Festival. I'm glad you could be with us this morning. Really happy to have Laura here with us from Trees for Cities, and she's going to be delivering this session for us. Laura is the School Programme Manager at Trees for Cities, and she promotes greening, tree planting and food growing projects in schools. Before she joined, Laura worked for 6 years at a primary school in Southwark, where she trained as a forest school leader and set up her own forest school and food growing programme, for which she gained a Southwark Excellence in Teaching Award. And Trees for Cities themselves are a charity with over 25 years of experience delivering tree planting and environmental projects to urban communities. So we're really pleased that they could be with us as part of the festival. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Please do feel free to ask questions. We'll leave a little bit of time at the end for any questions and discussion. So if you post in the chat, we'll be able to answer those at the end. And if you have any issues, post them in the chat and we'll try and help you there as the session goes on. So I'm going to hand over now to Laura and let her start her presentation.
Thank you, Hannah. Thanks everyone for joining today. I know it's a Sunday, so I'll try and keep things fairly fast moving and light. I'm also aware that 11 o'clock, it's Remembrance Sunday today, so we'll make sure that we finish in good time for that. So yeah, really happy to be here and be part of this event today. Today's presentation, I have to say I'm encompassing quite a lot of things, so bear with me. And again, if you've got any questions, we can look at those at the end. So today's presentation is looking at tree, woodland and food growing projects with schools in urban environments. If any of you are, working in rural environments, there's lots of transferable ideas that we can take with us today. So, yeah, just to build on what Hannah mentioned, Trees for Cities, we are a charity. We work at national and international scale, and primarily, as the name suggests, we plant trees in cities. But our work does extend a lot beyond that as well. And where I fit into the charity is that I develop the schools programme. So I work with our schools delivery team, and we have various models for urban delivery in schools. We work primarily with primary schools, but I have to say, our work does expand into secondary and special schools as well. And I just wanted to say, a lot of what our projects encompass are, we're looking at creating sustainable change and lasting impacts with the schools that we work with. But we, definitely incorporate fun into what we're doing. I think it's really important when we're talking about the outdoors, particularly with education in schools, that we keep that. And if anyone has ever been to one of our planting days with local communities, they are absolutely amazing, really fun days. So the session aims today, what I wanted to do is really a whiz through, but highlight some example models for outdoor learning projects in schools in urban environments. And as I said, the focus is on primary schools, but I do think a lot of this is transferable to secondary and to special school settings. Also wanted to just look at some of the challenges that the schools that we work with face when it comes to outdoor learning. And I'm sure if any of you in the audience are working in school settings or within the field, you'll recognise some of these challenges. And also I wanted to touch on, I think it's very important that we're looking at what's going on with the outdoor learning sector at the moment, particularly in light of COVID-19. And then also just to finish up by exploring some ways of delivering the primary curriculum in order to get children and young people outside and deepening that understanding of the natural world. So hopefully some takeaways for you today as well. So yeah, I mean, without wanting to preach to the converted and not knowing necessarily everyone's backgrounds here, I do think it's always important to remind ourselves why it's important to get children learning outside. And I mean, the list could go on and on and on. I've just picked some of my favourites, I guess. So the first one, you know, when I was working as a teacher, I was part of the transition into, well, it's not so new anymore, but the new curriculum of, I think it was 2014, it changed. And it became much more standardised testing. It felt very much like we were being asked to be in the classroom a lot more to get more results from our children. And one of the things that I really felt was that classroom experience became more and more, I suppose, how can we say it? It became a bit mundane. And I think, you know, outdoor learning is so important, you know, to get that break from the classroom and break from the screens as well. You know, we're all on the screen this morning. It's just part of what's happening in the current context of the world, but also I think, you know, it is just where we're going, using more screens in classrooms. So outdoor learning just, you know, for me, it's just a real antidote to that. And creativity, you know, it's not to say that in the classroom we're not creative as teachers, but I do think that outdoors just has this whole other world of creativity. I mean, I'm a big fan of the late Ken Robinson and all his talk on creativity and how as adults, you know, we lose that creativity. And that's what I think, you know, learning outdoors, even as adults, you know, really kind of brings us back into that creative space. Health and well-being elements, you know, there's so many studies around the impacts of learning outdoors for young children, and, you know, either on their physical, mental, emotional well-being. A fact I actually learned recently in a book I was reading was how, I think it was Lowry, did a study on how harmless bacteria that's commonly found in the soil can act as a natural antidepressant. So even just that fact of children putting their hands in the soil has this kind of amazing natural medicine, and it releases, you know, the serotonin in our brains. So, and then, you know, of course, the one of the other benefits, or many a benefit that we can, you know, we talk about quite a lot, is just the understanding of the natural world. And also I've put in here that, you know, connecting to the food we eat. So if we're talking about food grain projects, which I will talk about, you know, that really children more and more, for example, there was a study in, I think it was, not sure, I think it was 2017, the British Nutritional Foundation. And 30% of children actually believed that cheese came from a plant. So, you know, these kinds of studies really highlight that lots of children still are not understanding perhaps where our food comes from, or even what the tree is that's growing in their playground. You know, I think you can ask lots of people, perhaps in certain areas, you know, what the tree is outside their house, on their street, if they're lucky enough to have that. You know, so I think it's just really kind of bringing back that understanding of the natural world. And I've also included, you know, I think for me as a outdoor learning enthusiast and for a school leader, some of the tangible benefits that you get from taking children who have special educational needs is just, you know, it benefits them as it does, you know, children who are very much comfortable in the mainstream school system. But I do think it just allows that chance. You know, I worked with a child who had ADHD, and his teachers were just amazed at how he came alive in the forest school setting, and he became the most amazing whittler, and discovered that actually what he wanted to do when he was older was a carpenter, because he just needed to be active, and the outdoor learning setting allowed him to do that. So, you know, there's lots of different examples that we can draw, and I'm sure lots of you have got some examples of your own. And then finally, I just wanted to mention, you know, I think the outdoors, what we're seeing with the schools that we work with and schools that are coming to us, is that the outdoor setting is COVID compliant, or more so, shall we say, than the classroom setting. So actually, a positive out of some of the not so positives that's going on in the world at the moment is that schools are very much looking to develop their outdoor space and looking for creative ways that they can take classes outside that still obviously adhere to government guidelines. So I think that's a really important point, just kind of moving forward, and what's happening for the outdoor learning sector. So some current trends. I think it's always interesting to sort of place what's going on within individual schools in the kind of broader picture, to give us a bit of an understanding. And one thing that's it might be quite small on your screens, but one thing that came out in 2018-19 was the 25-year DEFRA environment plan, and as part of that, the government pledged to invest £6 million into the Nature Friendly Schools programme, of which there are different projects being delivered around that reaches completion in, I think it's, off the top of my head, I think it's 2021 or 22, and that really kind of just showed that, I mean, we've still got a long way to go, and I think there's arguments whether that's trickled down, but we've been lucky enough to receive some of that funding to deliver some projects, and I do think that really kind of highlights that there is a bit of, you know, there has been a shift in more recent years from the government, and in recognising that outdoor learning really is, you know, forms part and parcel of what teachers and school communities are about. Healthy schools is another, you know, accreditation I think is a really key thing for schools. You know, if they're looking to really deepen their outdoor learning structures within their school, you know, looking for ways that they can get those extra accreditations. So healthy school, actually a lot of outdoor learning can feed into what the Healthy School programme says, and so you have these different bronze, silver, gold awards. Food growing is very much part of that. So we've seen schools that have, you know, really kind of used that to add extra accreditations to their own schools and to celebrate what they're already doing. I suppose on the food subject of food growing, I think the school food standards is, you know, a legal requirement for schools in order to make sure that the food that's being provided at lunchtimes is, you know, it has the right nutritional value. And I think as part of that, you know, we've got the Rushford campaign at the moment for free school meals. And I think all that feeds into how we can start to really bring home, you know, food growing in particular into our schools, and looking at how schools can kind of be part of those campaigns, whether it is, you know, free school meals, or it could be other campaigns that feed into the outdoor learning taking place. Forest schools, you know, is a very popular model that we see a lot in schools. I'm a big advocate for forest school being used. Not necessarily, it doesn't have to be a forest school, but a forest school approach. I think there have been some criticisms of forest school in certain, you know, we won't go into that today, but I think generally the ethos of forest school is so powerful, but what happens is a lot of the time it's used in the early years and perhaps doesn't get to filter up into the high years. That's what I've noticed. So I'm a big advocate for keeping that going, and making sure that the key stage 2 and beyond, you know, still get access to some of that learning. And very quickly, without being too heavy on a Sunday morning, Ofsted 2018, they actually released some new guidelines, which I thought was extreme, really positive in terms of the outdoor learning environment, because it really talked a lot about broadening back the curriculum. It recognised that there'd been a big emphasis on standardised testing, and actually what was needed was to bring creativity back into the curriculum. So, almost instantly, or with these new guidelines, schools are kind of given the lovely creative key back to them to kind of actually, go and think about how they can really stick to their get those Ofsted structures in place through some more creative means. And I've got on here as well, I wanted to mention, was the Welsh national curriculum. I mean, I'm not an expert in the Welsh national curriculum. I have done quite a bit of we're actually at Trees for Cities starting quite a lot of work with Cardiff Council and the schools there with some outdoor learning projects, which is really exciting. So, but one thing that's really, I think, worth celebrating with the Welsh national curriculum is how it really lends itself to outdoor learning. Now, this is something that has been, I think, from January of this year was when it was started to be implemented into school. So it's a new curriculum, so it has things like health and well-being added in, and there is elements of outdoor learning, and then I think by 2022 all schools in Wales will be adhering to this curriculum. So I think there's some really exciting things, and perhaps the English national curriculum could look at that and follow suit, maybe. In Scotland as well, there's some really exciting things happening. There has been some, pushes from policy changes in light of COVID to be using much more outdoor learning. So again, it kind of goes back to the current pandemic situation and some of those changes that we are starting to see, albeit slowly. So some of these challenges, I'm sure those of you that perhaps have some experience of outdoor learning will not be new to you. I'll just kind of whiz through some of them. But these are lots of the things that we hear from teachers and schools ourselves. And also, I would say, having been a teacher myself and starting, I've now implemented 2 outdoor learning models in 2 schools. These are not uncommon challenges. So, things like time, the first thing is, yes, but this is all very well, you're talking about getting the children outside, but how do I find the time? Timetables are so busy and crammed as they are. How do I kind of find that extra time? So we'll go into some of these solutions in the next slide. Other things, budget constraints. So things, making sure that if you're working with children, particularly in some inner city schools where they might not have, access to wellies or sensible footwear or adequate weather gear. So, that's obviously brings in budget constraints. Resources. I think one of the things that can be quite overwhelming as an outdoor practitioner is the plethora of resources that you have out there, and it can sometimes feel quite overwhelming where to start. Another thing that we do see as well is just this, some teachers feeling that they just have a lack of confidence or lack of knowledge in the area, and not feeling kind of very much out of their comfort zone to take a whole class outside in a safe way that adheres to the schools, perhaps risk assessments and things like that. And also, if we're taking a whole group of children outside, I'm advocating a whole class approach. So that's what we found works best. There is, the challenge of space. If you don't have that space on and off site, how do you overcome that? These aren't, little things. They can become quite big barriers. And then the weather. Lots of people say, oh, it's raining today. There's that age-old saying of, there's no such thing as bad weather, there's just bad clothing, or bad equipment, whatever. I also think within this is we're all here as part of a climate change conference, and one thing that I think schools are facing and will be facing, as a recent London Authority report about the impacts of climate change on schools. One of the big things that came out was, how lack of shade, potential flooding to playgrounds. So I do think, there are kind of, the weather can be taken in two different aspects here. But on the subject of, some of the bigger things that we're seeing in schools, such as, taking children out and it being very hot and being lack of shade, there are real big arguments to just making sure that some of these playground spaces that are, traditionally are kind of concrete jungles, that we're really advocating for the planting of green infrastructure and trees. And that's obviously Trees for Cities, we're a big supporter of that, but that, trees are just an amazing shade provider, as we know. So, and a flood protector as well. So anyway, so just I don't want to go for too much on a tangent, but so some top tips for overcoming some challenges and ensuring sustainability with our outdoor projects. One thing, and if it's the only takeaway from today, I would say, is that when we are embarking on an outdoor learning program within a school, it needs to be a whole school approach. So really, sharing that responsibility. Quite often it falls on one person, and no matter how brilliant they are, because there are some, it's not to undermine the work that they're doing. It is just exhausting if you're doing it on your own without, support from SLT, senior leadership team, and other members of staff and the whole school community. So, with that in mind, writing it into the planning that you have, making sure that it's really embedded in the school's curriculum, and it's not just seen as an add-on. So that's things like making sure that those sessions are regular. So whether it's food growing, whether you're doing some forest school sessions, whether it's just an outdoor learning program that the school have developed, making sure that those sessions are regular. And also I would suggest that using in the early days, if it's the start of the school's kind of journey, so to speak, using the same location in the early weeks or the first few terms, just to ensure familiarity. So it might be that there are some hyperlocal spaces, some spaces that are, fairly near to the school, but and you might kind of want to be accessing lots of those. But actually, what's really important is just trying to keep that in the same space, just while the children and the confidence grows with the teacher, and making some aims. So is it to get some accreditation, writing it into your school's overall strategic planning? I think that really, that what we found working with schools is that just really helps embed that learning, that outdoor learning over the longer term. And some of the other challenges that we've mentioned, budget. It does take time and energy, and I do appreciate, that it's not easy just to kind of, particularly in today's very tight school budgets. But there are such a lot of, freebies out there. You can get free tree packs from Woodland Trust. You've got local garden centres. I managed to secure lots of plug plants from my local garden centre when I was setting up a food growing space as part of our outdoor learning experience. And actually the garden centre came down. I know this is perhaps talking like it's the old days, but we will get back there, I'm sure. But they came down and they were absolutely delighted to deliver some workshops to the children. And what happened was then the parents kind of heard that the local new garden centre that had opened had done this, and it kind of gave business to the garden centre. So it's just that kind of sharing. And there are still, grants and funding available for schools. There are funds that are available for schools and no one else. Trees for Cities can sort of support on some of those particular grants and funds. And also what we found is crowdfunding pages and things like that has worked really well for schools in just creating some funding quickly if you want to just buy some outdoor equipment or outdoor wellies or coats or whatever. So okay, so I wanted to as well, I'm just conscious of time, I wanted to whiz through a few examples of projects that we run at Trees for Cities. And, while these might be quite big scale projects, I think what's really important is if, for example, food growing is something that you're interested in developing at your school, or perhaps it's more the outdoor learning approach in general for a school type approach. Lots of these ideas, I think you can just take bits off them to start with, so don't sort of feel overwhelmed. But the Edible Playground programme that we run at Trees for Cities is our longest standing school programme. We've delivered over 100 edible playgrounds across the country, and it's in essence the creation of a teaching garden. So what we do with in partnership with the school is design and build a full-scale teaching garden. So these include raised beds, vertical growing spaces, greenhouses, compost and wormeries, etc. So it will include the planting of fruit trees where possible, and plants. And the provision of tools and equipment to get the school growing. And then what schools find really useful is for a year, or at least a growing season, the school receives training and support, on the ground support, for their edible playground. And as part of that, we devise planting plans and bespoke planting plans, and also showing and identifying ways that links with the curriculum. So that's one model that is used by us in schools. And another one, which is really exciting, and this is something that we piloted starting last year. So this is our Growing Among Trees programme. It's actually come to an end, but from this project, which is primarily woodland based learning, so it's really getting kids accessing their trees and woodland space, whether it's on the school grounds, or if they don't have access to that, their hyper-local setting. And really, I suppose it's the closest one that aligns to what we would say the forest school, the forest school approach. So this funding came from the Department of Education as part of the Nature Friendly Schools funding that I mentioned earlier on. And we were the lead partner. We worked with 4 other outdoor learning providers and delivered a package of outdoor learning over the course of an academic year to 6 primary, 2 secondary and 2 special schools. Now, unfortunately, halfway through, obviously, schools were closed down due to COVID-19. So while we didn't get to complete all our delivery as we were hoping, we actually did get to use a lot of our funding to create some really lovely resources, which I'm going to share with you in a bit. But just in a nutshell, what we found from these projects was that a minimum of 18 days in each school was needed to really get the school kind of embedding the outdoor learning into their overall curriculum. So what that included was things like having that time to locate the spaces, upskilling the teachers. So it wasn't just about having an outdoor practitioner come in and deliver a session. It was very much about learning with the teacher, and then that teacher passing on and upskilling others. So in that sense, we used what we called a sort of co-delivery and supported delivery models, which helped increase the confidence of the staff. And also looking again, like we do the edible playgrounds, bespoke resources that really align with not only the national curriculum, but the school's own curriculum as well. So, for example, making sure that the literacy texts fit into what was being taught in the outdoor sessions had a really powerful impact. And then just another type of project, which I did want to mention, is our Planting Healthy Air projects. Now, these are more air quality projects, is what I've called them. They have much more of an emphasis on empowering schools to look at to start with, we are talking about urban schools. So some of these lots of urban schools, particularly in inner city places. These sets of projects we've only delivered so far in London, although we're very much, hoping to roll out to other partner cities that we already work in. But the idea really is to use green infrastructure, so planting trees and different types of plants to demonstrate and help improve the air quality in the school's playground. So lots of our schools that we work with within a Planting Healthy Air project, are very concerned about the air quality and are looking for ways to perhaps tackle some of the issues that are facing their own school. And it might be that parents are feeling very concerned, and this is a way that the school are finding is a very powerful tool to kind of engage the parents and demonstrate that they're actually inputting some meaningful change. And so really, it's about, without going, I could probably do a whole presentation on each of these programs to be fair, but it's about greening up of the playground space. So here, there's in a picture, you've got the use of ivy, although in a way I probably shouldn't have put that picture in, because I think often we think about air pollution and planting some ivy screens, but actually, the research shows, we work in partnership with Lancaster University, who've done a lot of research in this area, that it's not, we perhaps, ivy does have a very powerful, it does trap the air pollution, PM particles and nitrogen dioxide, but actually, lots of other tree species and plants can also have that impact as well. So we are, although we're looking at it with an air quality element, we're also looking at kind of creating a space that's much more inviting, outdoor learning, or a playground space that can be used for outdoor learning. And also, again, these projects we would deliver them with school assemblies and planting workshops, and the teacher training. So again, following quite a similar model to the previous two programs that I discussed. But one thing that is quite different to these projects is that we do undertake particular research workshops with children. So it has a citizen science element integrated into the work that we're doing. So children get a chance to look at measuring the PM 2.5, which is the tiniest particulate matter, and one of the most lethal air pollution elements that can impact on lungs and breathing capacity. So it's really kind of empowering schools themselves to find out where perhaps some of their pollution levels might be highest, and looking at ways that they can mitigate against some of those risks. Okay, so I know I'm kind of like rushing through loads of different things, so I hope you're still with me. But I did want to just share a few free resources that you can find on the Trees for Cities website. So I mentioned that we were lucky enough to use some of our funding to put towards the creation of some new resources from this year, and we've got some tree and woodland curriculum guides that are up on the Trees for Cities website. There's a tree assembly up there as well, and I think one thing that I actually was part of writing these, and it's so lovely to just look at the curriculum. This is a Key Stage 1. What we haven't done is got all the year groups, and that's, I'd love to do that as our next step. But looking at how you can use your outdoor space, and this has got a particular focus on tree and woodlands. So, for example, I've just highlighted a few here. In literacy, taking some bark rubbings and really exploring the use of adjectives. And, we quite often we do, what does it smell? What does it hear? What does it feel like? But really, really giving children that kind of that sensory feeling. And then, for example, I remember teaching fractions, and we often use bread and cut the bread up into halves and quarters. And actually just going outside and getting the children to pick some autumn leaves off the ground and thinking about how they might be used as fractions. And you could almost kind of start in a bit of an investigation, because actually lots of leaves you can split into half, but why can't you split them into quarters? So really getting them to think about what a fraction is while being outside. So also what we've got on our website is some really lovely tree planting guides and resources. So the idea is that schools that are interested in doing some tree planting on site, if you're lucky enough to have a small space to do that, we've got some guides and planting guides for teachers, and also some really nice kind of pictorial guides to show you how to plant either a fruit tree, so what we call a maiden tree, a slightly bigger tree, or a sapling, so what's often called a whip in the forestry world. So that's your baby tree. And then one of my favourite resources that you can access is this tree planting plaque for children specifically with SEN. So this was developed in conjunction with our partners at the Sensory Trust. Amazing organisation who specialise in working with special schools and children with SEN. So these are social stories where they're using the widgets, and you've got some really lovely social stories about trees and also how to plant a tree. So yeah, those are really lovely. And then we've also got again, with one of our partners, Nature Nurture, on our website is this Wild Teaching Toolkit. So there are so many amazing activities, and there is also, it's a whole booklet of risk assessments, and you've also got kind of some golden rules for taking a class outside. It really is a very complete pack for getting a class outside. So do take a look if that seems of interest. And if food growing is something that you are developing or already develop or want to develop, at your school setting, then we've got these edible playground curriculum guides, which I wrote a couple of years ago, but they're very, very popular. They basically look at, you've got one for each year group, and what we did was take the core subjects and the foundation subjects and give specific examples that can be used in terms, so looking at kind of the what foods are growing at certain times of year. So hopefully there's some really nice ideas that you can use and adapt for your own settings if that's of interest. There's a planting plan that I just wanted to show you as an example. Now, this is something that we would provide. It's not on our website, but we do provide something like this for our edible playground projects. But it's something that schools I would highly recommend if you are looking and thinking about developing, in particular, a food growing programme. So having, it might not look as complex as this, but this basically just has different raised beds for different year groups and what they're going to be growing in that particular term. So what happens is that as your programme develops over the years, the children then get a chance, you know, if you look in reception all the way up to year 6, as they move through the school, they're getting a chance to grow different fruit and vegetables. And that's a really powerful experience, because if you look at all the different types of veg we've got on this planting plan, just for that one term, that's a huge amount of knowledge around food growing right there. So that's an example of a food growing plan. And just very briefly, we have, we do collect, obviously we're very interested in continually monitoring and evaluation the projects that we run and finding out what's working and what's not working. And the Edible Playgrounds, as I mentioned, is one of our longer standing programmes at Trees for Cities. So just some of the impact that has come through from our projects. These are from the Edible Playground head teacher surveys. So top emotions that people said they feel in the Edible Playground were happy, excited, interested, and calm. I think we'd agree, well, hopefully we'll agree that lots of those emotions can be felt in other outdoor learning models as well, when done correctly and safely, of course. And 71% of head teachers say that it's assisted their work with children with special educational needs or challenging behaviour. We've got lots of lovely examples. There was one example with a school where they actually created a parent growing space, and what happened was children that often were late to school and had no interest in getting to school by the 9 o'clock bell were coming earlier with their parents or carers to tend to their little bed and do some weeding and things. And so it actually, unbeknownst to the school before they implemented this parent and child parent carer food growing space, increased their attendance levels. So, some of these benefits we don't quite know before we start on our journey. And then we found that 100% of primary schools are using the Edible Playground to teach maths and science, followed by literacy and art. So again, it's about really showing that core subjects can be, it's not an add-on, it becomes part of the ethos of the school and the core learning that's taking place. And 90% say it's a significantly enabled outdoor learning across the curriculum. So that's with the Edible Playground. I'm aware that we are almost out of time. So just to finish, we have just a little video. I think it's about 2 minutes long. So I'll let you guys just watch this little video. This is about our Edible Playground project. And then we'll take it to questions.
A carrot. Is that potato? Sweet potato. Ooh! Wow. I know this one, but I can't say the name. Cucumber, what? Right? No. It's not cucumber? Yes, of course, yes. Edible Playgrounds is a UK-wide initiative that transforms school grounds into vibrant outdoor teaching gardens, getting inner city kids outside to learn, grow their own, and get excited about fruit and veg. 1 in 3 British children leave primary school overweight or obese. Only 8% of school kids in England get out into green spaces, but 90% of children feel happier and healthier as a result of learning outside. When I'm in the garden growing vegetables, I feel happy and relaxed.
Because normally in class there's not a lot of nature, there's not nature. unless you get insects in there by accident. But you'll see loads of different insects in the garden.
I love this job. I'm getting used to it. Gardening is really fun because they grow bigger and bigger. Then you can take it home, make soup or spaghetti bolognese.
We've seen a whole cycle of growing sort of vegetables and now sort of seeing it being harvested and things. And it's given loads of opportunities for the children to be coming outdoors.
I've got a bunch of carrots, but one of them is yellow, which is kind of weird. Look how much bees we've got. Let's see. Let's see. It's just fun where we get to put the seeds in and then let it grow and then put some more water in each day.
Just knowing where their food comes from is huge, especially for children that live in the city sometimes.
I don't have a garden. I live in a flat though. It makes me feel comfortable, like in the surroundings and in the space that I can go into, and it makes me feel that I could do anything.
Freshly picked fruits and veg sale. Freshly picked today and they're just round the corner if you want to buy any. For 50p a bag.
When I'm planting and do everything in the garden, I feel like I have a job.
We've noticed a big impact on the children to do with their mental health, their well-being, because it's just such a relaxing, quiet space within the school grounds.
Edible Playgrounds has inspired more than 68,000 kids so far, and we're still growing.
So yeah, there you have it. The kids, it wasn't scripted either. So.
Great, thank you, Laura. That was really interesting and loads of information there for people to think about and hopefully be able to put into practice. Please do, everyone, feel free to post questions in the chat. We've probably only got about 7 to 10 minutes, so we'll try and answer them. I'm sure people can contact Trees for Cities as well though afterwards if they've got things they'd like to ask. Terry posted a comment in the chat talking about the outdoor learning movement in Wales and how that's really being driven by the Wales Health and Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, and they have the commissioner dealing with that, which sort of made me think on kind of a bigger level, if you think there are other sort of changes in education policy or government acts that we should really be looking to see on a broader scale because of the benefits that this kind of learning and this experience of being outdoors has for the children and the classroom as a whole.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's going on in Wales is really it's really exciting, and I think it remains to be seen how well it gets translated by schools. And I think there is that challenge with every new curriculum that's introduced. It takes time for it to embed. But already, having spoken to some of our schools in Cardiff, they do feel quite excited at the broadening back, I suppose, of that curriculum. And I think it'd be really exciting for Wales to be leading some of that change and perhaps influencing the English government, shall we say. I do think that there is more that needs to be done, and I think Ofsted started to recognise some of those challenges, but ultimately it's not Ofsted that's writing, they are the inspecting body. How that then I do think there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of our own English national curriculum. But hey, I mean, education goes in cycles, as does life. And, I've no doubt that perhaps these things will come back into trend, if you like. Watch this space.
Yeah, I think, it's going to be exciting to see how things do change, especially with all the evidence that's growing about how all the positive benefits that this can have. And
yeah, absolutely. And you know, you are seeing, you know, with the pandemic, you know, people are accessing their green spaces and nature more than ever before, and this is going to have, you know, undoubtedly, and we're already seeing it, an impact on how schools engage with their own outdoor spaces. We're already seeing, you know, in cities like Liverpool, they released, it was as a result of COVID, but it's an environmental fund. The rounds of it's closed now, but that was really kind of like pushing forward environmental projects within the city, particularly with an education focus and things like that. So, you know, there are things that are emerging.
Great. I'm going to slightly change subject now, but when you were talking about the impact of these programs and sort of the way people have, the children have responded and the teachers as well, one thing that I sort of wondered about was in the broader setting with climate change, so much of the change and the strikes, it's all being driven by younger people, and there's such massive concern. I was wondering if you're seeing that sort of same thing translate as children are spending more time outdoors and in nature, understanding how it works, if that's sort of driving new kind of passion and interest and concern for the environment.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, actually, and it's something that we are looking to do more and more at Trees for Cities, is, you know, creating tree plant. One of the things that we're you know, don't want to talk about things that haven't yet got funding, but we are really hoping to push forward a tree planting program that has, you know, young people's voices at the heart. So they are the ones that are choosing, you know, the types of species, perhaps with the support of some urban forest experts. But really, kind of, we want the project, you know, we want projects to really embed the young people's voices, because it is being seen. There's so many exciting things, like there's the young, what's it called, the Voices for Tomorrow, I think it's, or something like that. You know, they're coming through, and it really does start with the younger people, and the sooner that they're kind of feeling empowered to make those changes, you know, that's the best we can do, I think. So yeah.
I know that your work is with schools, but I thought, given that we've got such a broad audience for this festival, do you think that there are resources or things that maybe parents can do with their own children to kind of take some of that learning into the home or school environment?
Yeah, another great question. Absolutely. I think lots of these resources, although, you know, what we found with working with schools is that it really has to be embedded in that curriculum for it to really work, and to not stress teachers out even more than they already are. But yes, I think lots of these ideas you can adapt and take to your own settings. I would say the wild teaching pack that Nature Nurture have developed on our website, that would be a great place for parents to start. And also, you know, I didn't get a chance to talk too much about our urban forest program, but we do a lot of tree planting, not so much now with guidelines, but, you know, I'm sure we'll return, but we do a lot of tree planting days in a lot of them do take place in London, I have to say, but they do happen in various other cities. And they're such an amazing day for families to come down and plant trees themselves, and you get, you know, a free hot lunch, and it's a whole day of just really lovely meeting people from your local area and stuff like that. So join the mailing list, you know, if that's something of interest. But I just think, you know, one of the favourite things I saw over lockdown was a parent who went around her local area and just with chalk wrote the names of trees, you know, the names of the street trees on the pavement, and it got such, you know, such big kind of excitement on Twitter, because people were like, oh, I didn't know that was a London plane, you know, I walk past it every day. And it's just simple things like that. I was doing like weekly tree facts and sticking them in my window, and I did like a tree quiz, and had like kids kind of texting the answers. You know, you can just be creative, and although we might be kind of less able to meet together, there are still lots of lovely ways that we can be creative with our kids at home. Definitely.
Yeah, and I mean, it was a long time ago now, but I still have memories of going out and planting daffodils, actually, when we were at school. And the nice thing is, even now, when we go back to see my parents in the spring, the same daffodils are still flowering.
Yeah.
And it's just a lovely reminder. And it was a great experience that brought lots of people together from different schools and the community. So
absolutely, because, you know, if you ask lots of people what their memories are of school, or just that one memory, a lot of them will be something that happened outside. You know, it might be the week-long school trip to Swanage or wherever it was, but often that's what sticks in people's minds. I mean, I remember teaching a year 4 group for a school, and it was a year later that we were doing our next set of forest school sessions, and I said, do you remember what our sessions were last year? And this kid could just remember every single, those 12 sessions that we had a year ago. They could name every single one. And I said, what were you learning last week in maths? And he couldn't remember.
No.
So, you know, it does stick. There is something, it really is powerful stuff. So
yeah. Right, I think we had better leave it there. We're coming up to 11, but it's been really lovely to talk to you, Laura, and to hear more about what Trees for Cities are doing. I'm just going to put a plug out there to everybody who's on this session to say, do have a look at some of our other festival events over the next week, or go back and watch things that have already happened. The recording of this will be online as well, so if you want to watch it back or share it with people who you think it would be really useful for, please do that. And last but not least, if you've got any feedback or comments, we're using Stickerbook for our feedback for the whole festival, so take a look at that online. You can complete and collect virtual stickers. And yeah, just thank you everybody for coming, and obviously big thanks to Laura for taking us through this session and sharing some really exciting projects with us about how we can kind of change the way children are engaging with the environment and nature. So,
and just, sorry Hannah, before you end, I did have a slide with my email address, so if I've seen Terry, you've got some nice comments, and we probably don't have time to go into them now, but please do email me. I'm very happy to take, you know, questions or any comments that have arisen from today's presentation. And my email address, it is quite easy, it's just laura@treesforcities.org. So you're very welcome to email me if you've got extra questions or anything you want to share.
Lovely.
Thank you very much.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Thanks, bye-bye.